things are really not looking good for Justin Trudeau or the Liberals. And I'm like holding back so much laughter. I've tried this intro so many different times. I burst out laughing, not because of what they're wrong about, but because it's just so ironic that the Liberals and Justin Trudeau are so quick to the punch, and they're always so wrong, and there's always so much backlash. Welcome back to another video, everybody. This is going to be a great one. You're going to want to sit back, relax. You're going to hit that like button. It helps fight climate change for all I care, and subscribe. Why not? It double fights climate change. Who cares at this point? Everything fights climate change. It's all free. If you want to support the channel, you could do so by going down in the description or the pinned comment below for a I love Canadian oil and gas, or I did not see that coming sticker. So what we're going to be talking about today in this video is you have conservative members of parliament, and later on you're going to see the Senate as well, that are bashing and criticizing Justin Trudeau and the Liberals for being so quick to the punch to condemn Israel's bombing of that hospital in Gaza. Now, I don't have any skin in the game, and I'm trying to approach this from as unbiased as I possibly can. The only skin in the game I have is my emotions. I'm completely just sad from all the innocent civilians, women and children that have been affected by this, and the ripple effects that this has had across the world, and how basically it just seems like there's a civil war about to happen. I'm sure you're noticing a massive shift in society, as am I. But Justin Trudeau and the Liberals were immediately just, they wanted to find a way to hate on the Jews or hate on Israel, and it seems like everyone is trying to find a way to hate on one side or the other, and they made a public statement saying that they're the ones that bombed that hospital. It turns out that through a not yet finished investigation, the hospital parking lot was hit, not the actual hospital. It does not seem like 500 people died, but that's, again, like we're getting all this fog of war, mis and disinformation. I hate to say that word. And you have some people that are very pissed. Civilians, citizens, and also politicians. So we're going to take a look at this clip of a conservative MP just basically saying, look, it's come out that you were wrong and you need to apologize.
The Honourable Deputy to Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's closest intelligence allies have already clarified the record. This government has not. So I'm going to give the government an opportunity to correct and clarify the record. Will the government clearly state that the Israel Defense Forces and the State of Israel were not responsible for the explosion at the hospital in Gaza on Tuesday? Hear, hear.
Take down your tweet.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what happened in Gaza is absolutely devastating. Palestinian civilians, Israeli civilians are equal and must be protected. You've heard the Prime Minister earlier today. Canada and its allies are working to determine exactly what happened, and Canadians deserve answers.
And of course, the government of Canada has not apologized for their mis and disinformation. We're going to take a look at Pierre Poilievre, who also is saying, look, you're adding fuel to the fire. When you have a federal platform, a government that is misinforming the public on a global scale or international scale or national scale, however you want to look at it, it's going to piss people off and create anger that is potentially unjustified in that certain instance or context. Let's take a look at what Pierre Poilievre has to say about this.
On another matter, Mr. Speaker, our hearts were broken to see a hospital in Gaza struck by a missile. Disinformation peddled by Hamas and regurgitated by CBC was then amplified by the Prime Minister. Does he agree with President Biden that the offending missile originated with terrorists in Gaza?
Le honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, our government has been unequivocal in condemning the terrorist attacks of Hamas against Israeli citizens. We are also adamant that attacks on civilians are wrong. We call on all parties to observe international law. Our hearts go out to the innocent Palestinian victims that have died as a result of this attack, and we will continue to work with partners around the world to call for a humanitarian corridor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Le honorable député de Thornhill.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
The government is saying that they have not been briefed on verified intelligence confirmed by the President of the United States that has led to the retraction of media reports around the world about yesterday's explosion by IRGC-backed terrorists that killed innocent civilians in Gaza. After 8 years, is the relationship with our closest allies, our Five Eyes partners, so damaged that they don't even share with Canada what they have already told the rest of the world?
Le honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The situation in Gaza is a tragedy. The loss of Palestinian lives is absolutely horrifying. This is an unthinkable act, and it's imperative that innocent Palestinians be protected and that international law be upheld. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It doesn't just stop in question period with our federally elected members of parliament. You also have senators that are standing up to this and saying, look, you're adding more fuel to the fire. You're misinforming the public. You have hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people just here in Canada that are pissed off because they're listening to what you're saying and they're taking it at face value. And it turns out that you were wrong. Let's see what Senator Don Plett has to say about the matter.
News outlets worldwide repeated a claim by Hamas that Israel had attacked a hospital in Gaza, killing innocent civilians. The rush to judgment that followed the CBC included Prime Minister Trudeau. He said both in the House and outside to reporters that the strike was unacceptable, illegal, and international law must be upheld. The timing of these comments implied he believed Israel was responsible. A story spread by a group our country officially recognizes as terrorists. Prime Minister Trudeau is simply not worth the cost to Canada's reputation. Is it too much to expect him to show a common sense leader and speak with sober second thought, especially at such a dangerous time as this?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question. Regardless of who launched an attack on a hospital, we would all agree that the bombing of a hospital is a deplorable, shameful crime against humanity and an act to be condemned. And even if the bomb was accidental, it is still one that tears our heart out, and our hearts and compassion goes out to all of the victims and their families. The Prime Minister did not attribute responsibility. He reacted, as all human beings would, with this, in the face of this horrible, horrible circumstance. The Prime Minister is clear and states so, I believe, today, that he is working with his allies to determine exactly what happened. And when that becomes clear to the satisfaction of the Prime Minister, he will so announce.
Senator Plett.
The implication was very clear, Senator Gold. And it wasn't just Prime Minister Trudeau that did it. Minister Joly did it as well. They both are not worth the cost. Tuesday night, just down the street, people leaving an anti-Semitism conference were told to exit through the back door for their safety due to angry protesters outside. That's the context in which the Prime Minister used such poor judgment. After 8 long years, he has no common sense and provides no serious leadership. Isn't this a time when it requires both?
Senator Gold.
I was at that conference. Sadly, it was not the first time that I had to be escorted out of a public event for fear of the violence of protesters. It occurred in Hamilton when convoy protesters barricaded us within a meeting, and we had to be escorted for our life. This is a deplorable situation, and the Prime Minister did the right thing by condemning the damage and harm that was done.
Since we're taking a look at Senator Don Plett, let's take a look at a committee hearing about farmers and their livelihoods and how the government is pretty much just trying to abolish farmers here in Canada.
On Senator Plett, followed by Senator MacDonald.
Well, let me start by saying that Senator Delphond is absolutely correct when he says I'm a conservative. I'm a proud conservative. Very proud of our policies, very proud of what the Conservative Party of Canada has done for our country over the last 150 some odd years, with the first Prime Minister of the country being a Conservative Prime Minister. But this has nothing to do with whether we're Conservatives, Liberals. This bill was passed unanimously by the Bloc, the NDP, and the Green. How much further apart could we get on environmental issues than between the Conservatives and the Greens? So the only people that are making this a political issue are the people that 96% of the time vote in favor of this particular government. So I don't know why we need to do it why we don't do it on the merits of whether this is good legislation or not based on whether or not we support the Liberals or the Conservatives. Both Senator Wu and Senator Delphond are talking about how negligible this is. But it's only negligible, according to them, when it comes to the farmers. Well, how about to the bill? It's also then negligible to the bill. But for some reason, it's tremendously important in the bill. When you listen to some of the opponents of this bill, you are left with the clear impression that doing so will somehow destroy the impact and the effectiveness of carbon pricing. This is simply false, colleagues. We are talking about a very small, focused exemption which is being applied in a specific area where the carbon tax does not fulfill its public policy purpose, but in fact does the opposite. While opponents like to suggest that providing an exemption for propane and natural gas for agricultural purposes will be like removing the fateful piece in a game of Jenga, which brings the whole structure crashing down, or blocks, or whatever you want to play. The reality is actually quite the opposite. Exemptions are part of the design of the policy. Colleagues, as I said earlier, exemptions are not a bug, but a feature of a carbon tax system. They are necessary to ensure that the policy is targeted and effective and does not create undesirable results. Exemptions exist for farmers and fishers, along with the additional targeted relief for residents of rural and small communities, users of aviation fuels in the territories, greenhouse operators, power plants that generate electricity for remote communities, and Indigenous peoples. Bill C-234 is not breaking new ground. It is one small but necessary tweak to the existing suite of exemptions, which will have no impact on the effectiveness of the carbon tax, but will have a significant impact on the ability of farmers to compete on a level playing field and continue to adopt more efficient technologies. This will help Bloc farmers. This will help NDP farmers. This will help Green supporting farmers. This will not just help Conservative Senator Delphond. I assure you, the Conservatives farmers that vote Conservative will benefit from this. So will farmers that vote Bloc or Liberal. So let's stop with Conservatives are opposed to carbon tax, so we must pass this amendment. That just simply doesn't hold water. If you have an amendment that has merit, argue it on the base of merit, not on who's opposing it.
It's sick and it's disgusting. And I feel like if there ever were to be another mass scale freedom convoy, I think instead of it all being truck drivers, I think you would see a lot of tractors and farmers, like kind of what they did in Deutschland, right? Where they had all the farmers with their tractors that dumped manure or hay like on the doorsteps of Parliament. I think you're almost on the verge of that happening here in Canada with how things are going, and the government is just taking away farmers. Like, you have hotshots in suits and ties in Ottawa that have never gotten their boots dirty. And I'm not one to talk about farming regulations, but you have expert farmers and experts in their field that are saying what the government is doing is wrong and it needs to stop. And the government, of course, isn't listening because they have quotas. They have a spreadsheet that they're trying to fill out and check boxes, and they just are ignorant to the fact that that has a ripple effect on not just thousands, not just hundreds of thousands, but also millions of people. And finally, we're going to close off this video with Pierre Poilievre, who talks about how Justin Trudeau just is not worth the cost. Us Canadians, we're paying an exorbitant amount of money, way more than we should, and Pierre Poilievre is extremely vocal about it. Here's the clip.
Mr. Speaker, we know that after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing, which has doubled since he took office. It's gotten so crazy that the cost of a house in Ontario means that one couple sold their 2,000 square foot home in that province and was able to buy a 6,000 square foot castle on 37 acres of land in France. They now say they could never sell the castle and afford to move back to Canada. Why does it cost more to be a member of the middle class in Canada than to be an aristocrat in France?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from the Conservatives. And Canadians will take no lessons from the Conservative, Mr. Speaker. There is one thing, Mr. Speaker, not many I agree, but there's one thing that the Leader of the Opposition can do for Canadians watching at home, Mr. Speaker, is to vote for the affordability bill, Mr. Speaker, that will empower more competition in this country, that will reduce GST in new housing, Mr. Speaker. Well, once for all, will they vote for Canadian, yes or no?
Speaker, none of the bills are affordable after 8 years of this government. I asked, why is it that you can buy a castle in France for a lower cost than a middle-class home in Ontario? And his response was basically, let them eat cake, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, people can't even afford bread after 8 years of inflationary policies. Will they reverse their inflationary deficits and reverse their tax hikes so Canadians can eat, heat, and house themselves?